Kosher Wine Podcast with Dr. Kenny Friedman and Rabbi Yisroel Bernath.
Hello, Kenny. Long time no see.
Rabbi, great to be back. I miss you. Every time I see you, your beard gets longer and longer.
Well, it's the new conditioner. That's the problem.
To be honest, it looks like it lightened up a little bit with all that California sun you've been getting.
Oh, yes. We'll talk about that. But before we talk about that, we haven't seen each other since KFWE.
That's espresso, by the way. It's not wine. I'm drinking espressos because it's 5:15 right now. I'm shot, and I'm just getting a little pick-me-up. This is we're doing a little two-fisted espresso shots. KFWE, we were both there. Let's talk. Right, we didn't discuss that. The last time we met, we were talking about attending, I think.
Yes.
And it was great to see you there. It's always great to give you a hug in person. What were your thoughts? I guess tell me what your thoughts were.
My thoughts were it was shorter than it has been in the past, and I was not able. I usually try to get to every table and try every single wine. That's the point of going. And I wasn't able to do that. And then as I was attempting to do it, I felt like it's almost a waste to even try that. And you always say that it's a waste to even try that.
Right.
But what other opportunity do we have to taste these wines to even give it a try?
I agree. It's funny you bring that up because I don't think you and I discussed that point, and I thought that too. And our friend Drew Kaplan, who writes up his thing is called Jewish Drinking. I'll give him a little plug. I'm actually trying to pull up the thing he wrote. But that was his main point. And I'm trying to bring it up. But that was his main point, was that it was not long enough. Here it is. I'm going to see if I can pull up the paragraph he wrote about it. But
we were actually talking about that afterwards. I was sitting in the lobby with him, and we were kind of lamenting about the fact that there just wasn't enough time.
Right. So I guess I had mixed feelings on that idea, but this is what he wrote. He wrote, in addition, no, that's wrong. That's just him talking about how his flight was late. But anyway, I think his point was, I don't have to read the exact thing. I think his point was that, there's not enough time to, I hear both points. I mean, listen, every minute that they're out there costs royal money to run the show. It's more food, it's more wine people go through. They probably have to pay more to the hotel, all that kind of stuff. I get it. But I agree. I mean, even from someone, and I think I make this point all the time, that I go to see the people. I go to see the winemakers. I go to see you. I go to see all the people in the business. But I would love to. I didn't get to some of the tables that I really wanted to get to. Josh Rinderman, our dear friend, I couldn't. He came over to me when I was talking to David Edelman. He wandered over to me and he's like, "When are you coming over?" And I'm like, "I know, I got to get over, especially because I've been dying to taste his Riesling and his Fum Blanc, which he didn't have there."
I thought I went over there right away. I thought I would get the legendary Fumé, and it gone.
Yeah, did he actually have it there? I thought he didn't even have it there.
He said that he didn't make enough, and it sold out right away.
Well, to his credit, our friend Yakov Malakovsky brought me a bottle. He left it there for me, but he was leaving like early, and I was like, "What am I going to do with it? I'm not going to like bring it into the event and carry it around with me." First of all, because people would have attacked me to try to get it. Anyway, I think I have sourced the bottle, we'll talk about that when it eventually comes. But I obviously didn't pass by his table at some point, because I certainly would have stopped and talked to him. But that just goes to show how much room there was to cover in so little time. The event was 4 hours, right? Does that sound right? It was
4 hours. It was exactly 4 hours. And you and I were there right at the beginning.
Well, I'll tell the story, is that I was with my wife and two of my kids at the mall, and I got a text from Rabbi Yisroel himself, come meet me. He wanted to come pick me up, which was so kind of him. And he did, and I got to drive his rented Tesla back. I never drove a Tesla before, so that was interesting. And we made it back, and we parked, and we got in right on time. I think it was like 4:30 on the dot. And And this year, in addition to, I think last year, we should say, because we haven't mentioned this yet, it was trade only. So it was people that are, affiliated to some degree. There's a bit of a wide spectrum of people get in, but it is. I mean, and it's less people than when they used to do, a lot less people than when they
Still
used to,
900 people.
a lot of people.
It's still a lot of
It
people.
never, to their credit, never seemed really crowded, I don't think. I never felt like I couldn't access things. And did you find that? I thought there was not.
I didn't feel crowded, but I did feel for these winemakers who spend a lot of time and energy and money to come in for, and I felt like they were just trying to go on to the next one, and get FaceTime in front of every person because it was trade only, and a lot of the people that were coming over to the table were people that really matter to them, and I felt for them like they couldn't get enough time. Like here, I was having a really great conversation with one of the winemakers. He's like, and it was so politely, I'm so sorry, but like I need to speak to this person. Like so and I understand that there's this kind of like and you honor that and respect that being there, knowing that they only have a limited amount of time and that they need to get to as many people as possible.
Right. Which is, I mean, on my side, I felt that I was like, there's so many people I wanted to see. And the truth is that year after year, I go back and there are more people that I know and there are more people that I want to see. And I just didn't, the time was, I think it's easy for us to say that, I think, but I think I would love another 2 hours. So that I love the 6 hour thing. And there are people that come for 2, 3 hours and leave. Not everyone is you and I who want to stay there to every second of the event. But once I'm in there, I love it, and I really, I'll tell you this year, I went right into the way they separate it as they did the previous couple times at least at the New York one was they split the Israel side, which is about it's not half of the wines being served, but maybe it's 30-40% of the wines. They split that into one side hall, and then there's a hall separating it. And then another ballroom is the rest of the world. I spent at least the first 2 to 2.5 hours on the Israel side. Really because I really, there were wines that I wanted to taste on that side, and there were people that I hadn't seen since before the war started, and I really wanted to catch up with some of those. Some of those people are my favorite people in the world, and it was so good to see them, and I really spent a lot of time in there. So it was by the time I got to the rest of the world side, I was already running so behind, which is why I didn't really get to spend time with like someone like Josh. But there were so many wines I wanted to try that I didn't get to. And I don't go like a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people go with their notepads and like trying to, I don't find that does anything for me anyway. It's not a good tasting environment. I go to see the people, but I still wanted to try some of the wines. Some of these wines I can't afford, and I just want to try them because that may be my only time trying them, which I'm sure is the case for you too. But
Absolutely. What anything stood out to you?
in terms of the wines, let me think about that while we talk about something else for a second. Why? What about you?
I was really impressed with a lot of the new wineries that are now, obviously, in order to get in, you have to be carried by Royal. So a lot of the new wineries that have now been picked up by Royal, especially the Israeli wineries, a couple that I hadn't seen before.
Right.
And how many of the winemakers and proprietors actually showed up at the event.
Yeah, it's really why I try to go to the New York one every year. This, as fun as all of their other events are, for instance, Miami has probably become the most fun one, I would say, especially because it's in Miami. New York one, you really get, and to be clear, it's actually not New York, it's New Jersey, which is even better for me. It's closer than when it was in the city. The Meadowlands is easier for me because I'm coming from Baltimore. But I agree. That's the main reason I don't want to miss it, because a lot of the winemakers come because they themselves, they don't come just for that. They run around all the shops and whatever. As much as we don't like to think it, New York is still like the Mecca of Jewish America, and the shops and a lot of those places still make a big impact on their sales. So a lot of them come for that. So so now that I thought about it for a second, I really I had the Raziel Blanc
Mm.
2023, and I loved it. And I know that's going to be here if it's not already. And it's a Roussan Viognier blend, and I really loved it. I'm sure it won't be cheap. Just the bottle looked nice. Raziel, for those who don't know, is the sister winery of Castel, and made at the same place. And it's really nice wine. They are pricey, but that was really delicious wine. I love that.
I love Roussan as a grape, and I think that Israel's been doing a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
remember the first time I had an Israeli Roussan was the Tabor a number of years ago,
Yeah,
and since then there's been quite a few that have come out.
yeah. Something else, there were three new Malbecs, Argentinian Malbecs that I tasted, all very different price ranges. One was a very entry level, and one was pricey. And I think that pricey one is easily the best Malbec I've ever had. Kosher Malbec is limited. Of course, everyone knows the few that are available, and the one from Argentina, and it's escaping my mind right now what it's called, the one made by Rothschild. But it's the Clos Chugadina, and it's called Probus 2022. It was really, really special, I thought, and not obscene expensive. But even the entry one, which I think is very affordable, was very nice. So that was nice to see. Those, in addition to a lot of the availability that we see from new regions and new countries, even just to find more availability of grapes that are underrepresented. Like Malbec, there's just not a lot of them. We talk plenty about how much cab there is, and I know cab sells, but I love when you see new regions. Sorry, and by the way, not Argentina. I don't know why I said that. It's from France, Malbec. It's from
Exactly.
Cahors.
That's what I thought you were.
Spacing out. I told you
Yeah.
that's why I'm having multiple espressos. From Cahors in France, and close Chiguadina, and really great. And like I said, and what I was saying
I
is that
love those wines. The last one
you get to taste those.
I had it now, and the last one I had of the Cahors was the 2016, and it is still fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
Fantastic.
By the way, you can go back and edit out my stupidity so that
No, I people should know.
that happens when when you're just ad-libbing, and not ad-libbing, but when you're recording live, that's what happens.
That's part of the joy of this.
Another wine I had that I really liked was which I think is only going to be available via restaurants, and is the Herzog Special Reserve Chenin Blanc 23. Was really nice. I think I'm saying that wrong. I think the non-Mavushal one is the winery one. It's only going to be a winery and a wine club, and then the other one is going to be restaurants and that type of thing. But I don't think either of them are going to be available via stores and whatever. But you should try to get it if you can. That's a really nice wine.
I was impressed with the new Darom by Yatir. I thought that was.
I didn't have it.
It's a really nice entry level
Cab. It's
cab.
like that cab, that Darom cab. I went over because she's one of my favorite people in the business. Is Eti Edry. Everyone loves her. It's not just me saying that. She's amazing, and I went over to her almost right away just to say hi to her, and she showed it to me, and I'm like, I'm absolutely going to come back and taste it. But that was one of the problems of running out of time, is that I never got back around there. But I heard it's nice, and that Darom is it's a newer line from Yatir, and I think they're finding their way. But that's I'd like to try that eventually. But I'm glad to hear that you liked it.
Definitely some of the new French wines that I can't afford, like the 22 Ponte Canet. That was everything the 21 wasn't. We were saying the 21, there was forest fires or whatever the story was.
Well, no, the 21, it was the vintage was greener, it was a colder vintage. So it was there are some people that think that 21 is not to the, listen, a wine like that is still going to be great. It's going to be a great wine. But if you're going to spend $250, $350 on a bottle of wine, it better be more than just great. It better be not just great, but also that it'll evolve and that it'll become something really, truly special. There are people that think that won't be the case. But I sat at a dinner with Menachem Israelovich, who vehemently said that's not the case. Of course, these are his wines, so you take that with a grain of salt. But I think that, it's sometimes it's just a matter of time to see what happens with wines. It may, I get people are experts and they know when they first taste it, like this wine is not going to develop the same way, and maybe it's not as great, but who knows? I mean, I agree with you. I thought the 22 is certainly a superior wine right away. Right away it is, but
I think with some of these wines, and tell me if you think I'm right, no one's drinking them anymore. They're just become like trade wines.
what do you mean?
Like the Ponte Canet, they're gonna store it and they're gonna, I don't know, sell it at auction in 20 years from now. I don't know what they're gonna do with it.
I mean, there are people that you mean you're saying people buy them and don't drink them?
I think so.
No,
That's
I mean,
point.
listen, I don't do either. I can't
Right.
afford those. I can't afford $300 wines, so I'm lucky to drink them with friends that have that pocketbook to afford that stuff, or at trade shows. But otherwise, I don't buy these wines. I'm pretty clear about that, and I want that recorded because I want my wife to be able to hear that I'm not spending $300 on a bottle of wine. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the case. There are certainly people that are drinking them. I don't. Someone is, because even if they're selling them down the road, someone's buying it. I mean, it's something that we should talk about one time. Kind of the secondary market for kosher wines. I think about that a lot, and I talk about it a lot, but we've never talked about it. And the idea of like, there's a secondary market for non-kosher wines. Let's say even investing in wines. In kosher wine, that's a very gray area. No one has there's no real, what's the word I'm looking for? Basis, or there's no real set in stone type of ideas of what it should be or what you're going to get. So that's a massive risk if you think you're going to invest in kosher wine.
Well,
I happen to think there is some market for it,
I
but
think there's a market for it, and I also think we're just getting started. There's a
right,
lot of people
I agree.
who have been in the kosher wine industry for a while, and they're tired, and they're starting to kind of slowly think of themselves as phasing out. But in my opinion, the kosher wine world is really, especially the high end kosher wine world, is just getting started.
I agree. I mean, there's plenty of negativity and naysayers, but I think we find that we're negative people. That's what happens with thousands of years of persecution. But even when it comes to the non-kosher world, where there's like, oh, the Napa's terrible, and this, you always see all these negative forecasts. I just read a thing yesterday that there was some like auction, and they had the highest sales they've ever had. There's still plenty of demand, and you and I both know, even just from our circles of people we hang out with, that there's plenty of demand. And yes, for higher end wines and even the stratospheric expensive wines. So I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, Moises Cohen was telling me that he went to a vertical tasting, I think a couple nights before the KFWE, of all the closed Masoras from, I think, 2010, 2022. I mean,
Saw that.
people have these wines.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, yeah, I have been doing that myself with the closed Masora. I actually need to catch up the past few vintages, but I have. But the difference with me is that some of those people have a case of each. I have one of each, and it's only for that specific wine because I love it and I love them. It was great to see him, by the way. It's always special to see Dr. Moises himself. It was great to see him and his two children. Unfortunately, his wife couldn't make it. He could have had the whole family, and they are a family business now. And I've been thinking that I need to write up Leo, who's now a winemaker there, and she graduated. So it's really cool. They all, the three of the four of them were there at KFWE, which was
I
very
think
cool.
Anna doesn't want to come because she doesn't speak English.
So I mean, there are other people there that don't speak English. We would love to have her anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
To me, going there, she was the best gift of going there.
right.
Speaking to
You
her, and her passion and her love of wine is unbelievable.
you got to taste that new brandy, didn't you?
I did.
You tasted it in Spain or you tasted it at KFWE or both?
No, so he brought it. He came to Montreal before the event, so he brought a
Oh, right,
taste
right,
of
right, right, right,
Montreal.
right.
Yeah,
Wait a
that
second. I'm so confused here. You went there in Spain.
I was there in
You
December
also did an event with them in
and
Montreal,
did an event with them in Montreal.
and you saw them at KFWE.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. So to be clear, where did you have the brandy in Montreal?
Yes.
So I tasted literally one drop of it because I went over to the table finally all the way at the end. It was because I had to talk to them for a little bit, and and I was passing by the table, and David was like, "You have to taste the brandy." He's like, "Oh, you got to taste the brandy," and he pulls out. They had like only a little sampler of it, and it was empty. And I was like, "It's not totally empty. There's a drop in there." So I tasted that last drop. It's a beautiful bottle, by the way. Just I'm saying from an aesthetic point of view, it's gorgeous.
I mean, look, and that's something else that I was really thinking about KFWE is that wine is really become, I know that we don't like to say this and no one's going to say it out loud, but you and I don't have any reason not to say it out loud, is that wine is often about the packaging and about the experience. And
Sure.
almost like I see this $300 bottle sitting there amongst 500 other bottles and saying, my gosh, but that wine needs an experience. You can't just go over to the pourer and say, can you pour me some of this? I want the fanfare around it. And you don't get that.
I think packaging definitely matters. And you see that in I think represented in sales a lot of times. The wines that are
I,
yeah.
I mean, I was saw the Gross Brothers winery that was represented for the first time by Royal there, and they were there. The
First
Onyx.
time, really? I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that.
they were with Allied before,
Huh, I
and
didn't know that.
I was
Okay.
also interested with that. Just interesting. When they were with Allied, I just like the wine was just priced out. It was too expensive. And I think now I saw a very different price point attached to it. And I think that was Royal to their credit. They probably said, this is the correct value of the bottle. I'm really happy about that because I do like their wine. I like the Black Onyx. I like the Genesis. A great packaging. The Genesis is so well done in the packaging. And it was interesting because they don't speak any English, and they only speak Hebrew, and they're just the sweetest, nicest
Yeah,
people.
I don't
Really,
know them. I didn't stop at that table,
yeah,
and I don't know them.
yeah,
So yeah, I heard the wines were nice. People were talking about that the
yeah,
gross wines were nice.
yeah.
Um,
They've always had fantastic wine. Just it was too expensive, and now I see that they Royal kind of must have
I don't
given them.
know if Royal does that with every wine, but it's nice to know they're doing it with some wines. Well, that's good. I mean, that's obviously I'm gonna have to try to get some of those.
Well,
I'm
I mean,
looking through my
I can
pictures.
only think it was Royal because when they were with Allied, it was a very different price point. Like,
Yeah, I mean, but that's not the case. I mean, I wouldn't say that's the case with the Allied. A lot of their wine is very affordable. I mean,
yeah,
for instance, Deltona is Allied, and that's very affordable prices almost across the board.
I would assume that the distributors, and I'm not saying anything against Allied, the distributors do not decide the price points for the wine. They leave it up to the wineries. But I think at some point,
Maybe unless you're Royal and you have such massive buying power.
no, but at some point they can come along and say, like, for your benefits, and which is I'm assuming what happens, we think that this is overpriced.
Could be.
I don't know. I don't know any information that you don't know, and
I'm sure that Royal has the ability to sway things because they have massive buying power. They are the elephant in the room. I mean, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but
yeah.
they are the by far biggest importer and distributor. So I'm sure they have a lot more sway than some of the other smaller.
Another winery I was really happy to see there that I hadn't seen before, Pinto.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pinto is very young,
Yeah,
and they are with Royal now. So they were showing five wines, and they have. I'll tell you what I liked. I liked the Chardonnay.
amazing,
Um,
right?
that Grenache was very interesting. I wouldn't say I loved it, but it'll be interesting to see how Yaakov Oria really develops that winery. It's a very young winery. It's a few years old,
Yeah.
so it'll be interesting to see. But I love what they're doing. By the way, that's a good example of like I think I like their labeling. I like their labeling.
I also agree with you. I think it's very classy, the label. And I David Pinto and Jakob Oria standing next to each other. I
Right.
love that partnership. It's a
That
beautiful
was cool.
partnership.
Yeah, that was cool. And that's exactly why it's what we're talking about. The fact that they're both there is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I feel like some of them they had to mule themselves into because they weren't here in time. I feel like I heard that they actually had to bring some of them themselves to show them. It's always an interesting thing that with these wine shows, especially when you're talking about something like Ponte Canet or something like, how are you even getting an accurate representation of a brand new, high-end Bordeaux when it's being popped 10 minutes before you drink it or a minute before you drink it and pour it in a glass that's probably not rinsed well and you have all kinds of odors and it's like that's why from a tasting perspective I'm like to me that's not you're getting maybe 5% of what you could get if you're sitting in a proper environment and
Give
tasting
me
it.
another opportunity to taste the. I mean, I can't, like you said, you and I can't afford that. So when are we going to have another opportunity? So I also feel like it's wasted, but at the same time, that's my moment to be able to taste that wine that I so much want to taste.
100%, which is I'm not saying no to it. I'm definitely not saying no to it. But I think so to wrap that up though, I think like the timing ideally it would be a longer event. Um, Food I would love a little more, even though I don't eat, I'm just talking about what I heard from people. I would have loved a little more food, but it's a trade show. It's not a public show. So I don't think the onus is on them to put out dinner. Meaning like you can go to trade shows, they don't really have the responsibility to put out any food. Now, the reason they do also do some food is because the food they were doing, some of it at least, was their own food.
Right.
Some people don't realize that Royal is Keiko and Keiko is Manischewitz and other companies, which they do. The wine is a small part of their company. The food is much larger, I think. And they were showing some of their own food products. So I think that's a good opportunity for them to expand that and really get it back. I wrote up a whole long piece on KFWE and my thoughts on it, and I didn't talk enough. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's a good opportunity to get back to making it a real food and wine show because nowadays it's really just a wine show. It's not a food show. Food's there just to have something to nibble while you're, doing the wine thing.
Right.
I think it's a real opportunity to really showcase their foods also.
Yeah.
And
I
I do because we both do a lot of events. Like a lot of times, people want to come just for the food. And nowadays that there is still one of those big food trade shows, I think, in New York. But I think they have so much that they do now. I think they should expand that also. Just a thought.
yeah. Yeah. I've been doing a lot of events lately and really enjoying presenting. Like I like obviously I'm a pub, I like the public facing and presenting wine and just introducing. I think there's a brand new world of people who are really interested in kosher wine, who don't know enough about kosher wine and want to learn. And it's just been
Question.
it's
You know,
great.
I
I saw you did that event in Maryland. It's fantastic.
yeah. Um, my friend Itzik Stern. Do you know Itzik?
I don't know him. No.
He's the I forget what he goes by. He's like the sniper Somali or something he goes by. He's been in the Israeli army in recent years, and he's been like in heavy duty areas in Gaza and wherever else. And he has very interesting stories. He's a great person, and I love him dearly. He's a very close friend. And he was just in America this past few days, and he was doing an event not far from me in the DC area. And like I was talking to him, and I don't want to embarrass him by saying this, but he was like, telling me I don't think this would embarrass him because I have the same thing. And that before I do these, there's some sense of nervousness to do it. And he's like, I have like imposter syndrome. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, as much as anyone else. But I feel the same thing always. I'm like, you don't want to ever be exposed, right? To do this. But like I told him, and it's getting to the point of what you just said, is that so people that are coming to these things, they don't know a lot about it, and they really just want to learn about it and like drink great wines, and you're never going to be exposed on that level. It's the opposite. It's like people are just love the idea of it. People love learning that there are kosher wines made in in Georgia or some random place. And that's our job, I think, is just to keep expanding people's minds and palates, and I just see more and more interest in it.
And I would say what I've done recently, I'm veering off of the trying to sound. I think it's really people who do these events and they come out and they start stating facts that don't like people do not feel like they understand what's going on. You're using words that are words that we use in the wine world that people don't know, and it just makes it so unattainable. Like, oh my gosh, there's a whole thing. And I stopped using wine words at these events, started using words that I think people can relate to, that are more descriptive and to help them really build their understanding and their palates.
For sure. One thing I tell, like I told Itzik, I'm like, the less you actually talk about boring stuff, the better time people have. Anyone that's really interested in the nerd stuff will come over and schmooze with you. It's more about people getting together with their friends and drinking great wine. And you're there for the people that are that interested. When I do those things, it's just a minute or two about something interesting about the winery. People do like the personal stories of wineries more, telling something about the winemaker or something interesting about the winery more than they want to hear about, minerality or terroir or any of these other things. People do not care about that. I don't care about that. I care about like tell me the humanity of the winery. And that's what is always interesting to me about wine versus other spirits or whatever anyway, is that wine is there's so much more art in wine, and there's so much more organic about wine, that it differs from grape to grape, and that it differs from vintage to vintage, and from vineyard to vineyard, and all those little things do matter. But there's so many interesting stories in wine, and I relate that to Jack Daniel's, which is such a commercial product, and it's meant to taste the same. That's why there's not a year on the bottle. That's why there's not a vintage on it. And that's why, because it's like, it's commercial product. So different than Coca-Cola. And that's so different. And it's why people argue about what vintage, like 21 versus 22, and people get all crazy about that stuff, is because it matters in wine. And there's that organic factor, So I think all the things you're saying, we agree. And I think that part of the story is the stuff I try to transmit, not like you're saying, that boring, altitude. What is that? What does altitude mean to anyone?
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean that's but there is such an interest for it. There's such an interest for it. And you see why we love it, and you see what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Before I forget, by the way, someone texted us after our last pod and asked if we could talk about something. And what was that?
Let me check.
We're probably not leaving you any time to talk about California, which I
No,
did.
that's okay.
I wanted to hear about, or I have a whole ton of wines here, but
I would love to.
do this more often, and it's my fault, I think, but we need to do it more often. So we should pump out a few before.
So here was it was from Adam.
Yeah.
And he writes, on a recent episode of the podcast, you mentioned looking for topics. In that same episode, you briefly mentioned some Israeli exclusive varietals used in wine, such as Argaman and Carignan. I would be interested in learning more about the pedigree of these types of grapes, not limited just these two, and if there are others as well. I think we have spoken about some of these grapes.
Indigenous grapes, and yeah, we have.
And
Yeah.
he continues, and wines that are good representations of them at different price points.
That's a good idea.
There are many out there, but I don't want to buy some at a higher price point only to find out that they're basically cabs and not good. That's a good point, because some of these unknown grapes, there was that Feldstein that they were tasting at the KFWE. That was which grape was that?
Dabuki.
Yeah, the Dabuki grape.
Yeah, that is an indigenous grape.
And I had bought the Tepperberg Dabuki, and I was like, okay.
Right.
But when I tasted Avi Feldstein's Dabuki, that was like interesting. Like, whoa.
Yeah, I would agree that the Feldstein Dabuki was more complex. It's about twice the price though. So it's I think that Feldstein is like a $50 and the Tepperberg is more like $25.
Right.
They look different. Their bottles are made to look like one's more expensive than the other. But I agree that Feldstein Debuchy was really good. I liked that Tepperberg Debuchy. I thought that was good. The label is curious. It had like band-aids or something on it,
Yeah,
right?
on the Pepperberg, yeah.
But I thought it was interesting. But and regardless, I love that Tepperberg has been making these indigenous styles for a while. They're one of the leaders in that. And I love that. I love, it just gets back to the same point. It's like I don't want to drink cab all the time either. I'd like to, and it's something we've talked about is that Israel should really try to find like a national grape, I think. Like a lot of countries are known for a grape, and Israel's not known for a grape at this point. And I think there's options there. And they don't necessarily have to be an indigenous grape, but they should try to, that's something that develops over a long time. It's not going to happen in a year. But they should, there's definitely there are varieties in my mind that I would think that Israel just does really well, like Carignan. But
Spain also does Carignan well.
yeah, but that's fine. But Spain's not known for Carignan necessarily. Well, it is, but I'm saying, but Spain, I don't think Carignan. That's not the first I think Tempranillo for Spain. And when you think, obviously, a place like France, it's so many varieties, but people think Cab. But people think Cab of the United States also. But that's not my point as much as like there are smaller countries that are just known for one specific grape, and I think that's ideal for a small country to stand out. Like Argentina, that's just why Argentina popped up in my head before with Malbec. That's exactly why, because
Right.
you attach it to Malbec. They just really make great Malbec. We don't get so many representations in the kosher world, but I think it really puts countries on more of the international map when they really, specialize and there's something really unique, like Semillon in Australia, like which again we need more kosher varieties, kosher representations of that from Australia, but like the Hunter Valley Semillon is like so well known around the world, and that's something special. Like you think of for the Australia, and that would I think be a smart point for Israel to focus on that versus just trying to make cab like everyone else in the world.
I think of like the Willamette Valley. The Pinots were always French, and then all of a sudden they said to make and we have some kosher Pinots from there now that are just fantastic.
Correct, correct. Yeah, so but it's cool to see those. It's cool to see the Tabuki coming from Israel, and Israel needs you to buy their wine, and Israel needs you to visit, and Israel needs you to go up north and visit the wineries, and like we talked about last time. And there's just so much great wine coming out of Israel right now, and it's so buy it.
Maybe the Argaman. I mean, the Jezreel Argaman is just a fantastic. I keep on going back to it because it's just a fantastic bottle. I have a few cases of the 2020, and it's one of my favorites.
Which one are you talking about? The Jezreel?
The Jezreel Argaman, yeah.
Yeah, and another Carignan that I always think of, and why I think Carignan all the time is because two of my favorite bottles of Israeli wine, and it's like vintage after vintage, are the Vitkin Carignan and the Recanati, what do they call it? The wild, I forget what they call it, the Recanati Special Reserve Wild Carignan.
Yeah, it has that full tree on it, that wild tree on it. Yeah.
That's a series, but the Carignan specifically, there's also Petit Syrah, and they make the Merlot and the Cab also. But
they also have a Marciano in that series, yeah.
That Special Reserve Wild Carignan and the Vitkin Carignan are two perennial favorites of mine. By the way, it was so good to see. I could say it was great to see Asaf also, but it was great to see the new Israeli journeys that with the orange label. That is a winner for me every single time. And so, we didn't get the 22, but the 23 is now on shelves, and it's great once again. It's $25, and I think it's just such great value for such a great wine. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm biased because it's always in my head and I think about it year after year, but I tasted it. That was a wine I went over to taste specifically, and it was fantastic. And I think it's undervalued. So
Agree with you.
So yeah, I mean so anyway, to wrap up KFWE, I loved it. It was great to be back. It was great to see you and so many other faces. Um, I can't wait for the next one. I always love them. I really think about doing an event in Baltimore, DC all the time. It's complicated, like everything in the wine world. But I really want to because I would love to bring that type of experience to people here that just we get so little of it here and we get so little in ways of labels and what we're able to access in Baltimore. I really would love to, if you're listening to this and you're on board, just, I don't even know what I want people to do, but
Exactly. I think of Montreal, like I don't think I could do it here, but it would be great to be able to bring these type of experiences to people.
yeah. One of the complications is that if you can't get the labels there, and like we can't get the labels in Baltimore, so I don't think it's not as simple as forget the part of like, oh, why are you showing wines in Baltimore that you can't buy in Baltimore? I don't think you can actually bring them to Baltimore to a wine show. I'm not sure about that, but I feel like that's
We have
true.
the same problem in Montreal. I mean, because
Yeah.
of
Well, you can't
well,
even get them over the border, probably. That's a whole different story.
exactly.
So we'll look forward to the Baltimore Montreal Wine Show of 2025. The
So,
Baltimore.
what are you drinking? I want to hear.
Well, we celebrated a big birthday for my mom. So I pulled out, what do you think I pulled out for?
You pulled out a bubbly.
Pulled out a bunch of bubblies, but the two I have sitting in my office, sitting here, um, are the Elvi Cava.
I love that.
Always great. And Elvi Cava is not a vintage, so I never know how old they are when they're sitting in my cellar. This one is definitely released a few years ago, so it had a little age on it, and that was apparent. Very different in style than the next bubbly I'm going to show you. Since everyone puts them in the same category, it's the only reason I'm showing them together, but they really have nothing to do with each other than that they're both bubbles. Is that this the Koenig Cremant from
Oh, I haven't had that one in a while. Yeah.
I love it, and I stock up on it because it's super affordable. It's under $20. I think it's a bushel. It is a bushel, so you can take it to restaurants. It's such a crowd pleaser because versus the reason I'm showing them together is just that reason. Forget that how they're made. That's a whole topic we could spend an hour on. Cava, which is really the same as champagne, versus Prosecco, um, and Cremant, which don't go through secondary fermentation in the bottle, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to get into all that. It's about the style I wanted to talk about. So first of all, the Cava, of course, is from Spain, and it's kind of Spain's national champagne, but made in very specific style and very specific ways, just like champagne is. Versus the Cremant, which is French, but not champagne, because it's not from Champagne. It's from Alsace. Cremant is made in a more simple style, and it's a more simple type of palate to it. It's like I said, much more crowd pleasing. Cava always has a certain little bit of bitterness, I think, on the finish. It's more of a real champagne drinkers type of bottle versus the Cremant, which is really much more approachable. There's a little more, at least with this, a little more residual sugar in it, and really crowd friendly. But I love it. I mean, I can drink it in every single meal.
You
So
know,
good.
you know what I've been thinking about lately? That wines from Alsace are really undervalued. I
That
can't,
well, that specific brand is great. I love
well, I
Kona.
think, but there's other wines from Alsace that I think, oh yeah, that was a good wine and it wasn't so expensive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that Koenig brand, their wines are great, and they're all like $20. So
Yeah.
I talk about them all the time. I've written about them. I'm a big believer in their wines. Their Riesling is great. The Gewürztraminer is great. I agree, and that's I would love more wines from Alsace.
Yeah. There are quite a few in France. I think a lot of them don't get exported.
Yeah, we don't get them here though,
Yeah.
and I don't even mean in Baltimore. I mean in the United States.
Right. Right. For some
Um,
reason in Canada, we have more access to French wines, and so we do get them.
I'll show one more wine. I have a whole ton of wines here, but I tasted the new Shira. What they
Oh,
call
tell us about it.
so they call it it says Bro.Deux,
Right.
and but it's what they call unofficially the Bro.Max. I don't think it says it anywhere on the bottle. it is 100% cab. They made this is the new vintage. Oh, it does say Bro.Max. If you're looking, it's on the bottom of this gorgeous label, which
Yeah.
they obviously this is a label that stands out. And if you can't see, it's their standard Bro.Deux label, kind of in style, but it's also like gold lettering. And it has a tactile like feeling to it, which a regular Bro.Deux does also. Anyway, it does say Bro.Max on it. And this is the 2022, which just came out, and I believe I prefer it to the 21. I thought it was fantastic. It was, and it is a bottle that I think is going to lay down nicely. It was really delicious. It's everything you expect from a California more expensive, like higher end cab, I thought. So get your hands on it if you haven't had it. And I'm talking to you, not the listener.
I haven't had it.
It's great. I gotta get more because I only got one of it. I got more, but I gave a couple to friends, and I need more now but I had to taste it because I feel like some people at least rely on what I have to say about it. So I loved it. I wouldn't rush to open it. It's not, going anywhere anytime soon, and it is a bottle that I think will really age nicely. But I see. I didn't. What I did was I opened it. I had a lot of family over, and we opened it before Shabbos, and I decanted it just after tasting it. I'm like, yeah, that's a big boy. So it needed time to decant, and it was really lovely. Like 3 hours later. So I wouldn't say that this is a wine that's totally unapproachable, but it could use a decant if you're going to open it in the next year. So definitely get it. And I of the wines I've tasted of the new Shirah releases, I've really enjoyed them. I had the black and blue. I really liked again. They've kind of over the last couple of vintages with their reds, they've pumped the brakes a little bit on the ripeness of the fruit, so they've brought it back a little bit into probably a more mature style and not as in your face. And I love what they're doing right now with all their wines, really.
I opened up a bottle of the Saint and Barbarian not long ago, and I thought it was just fantastic.
That Satan Barbarian, I think I have one of the original. I think it was a 2013. I think it's still sitting downstairs, which honestly, when I first opened that years ago, I was like, I don't know what happened. I'm like, they really blew it on this one. But, and then again, a year later, I'm like, I just didn't like it. And then like maybe 5 years later, I opened one and it was amazing. And it was like Rhone City, and it was not city, but it was all Rhone. So good. It was so like gamey and meaty, and anyone that says that their wines don't develop like into like with tertiary notes and things like that, I don't know what they're talking about, because that wine certainly did.
Very complex. Yeah, I think it was a 2013 that I opened actually.
Yeah, that's special stuff. That is
Yeah.
special stuff. So, what about you? What wines?
So I just got back from a trip that dreams are made of.
You're gonna make me cry because I'm so jealous of your
I'm
trip.
so sorry. I was trying. I texted you. I was like, I don't know if you want to see what's going on or you don't want to see what's going on.
I know, obviously, I do, and it's amazing, and I'm jealous in a good way, and I definitely it's on my very short bucket list of things I need to do. But tell us about it.
It there's just okay. So I went to I went to three wineries in person and had a lot of California kosher wine. But I spent a day with Binyo, and that was really just an absolute gift. I worked with him in the vineyards. We had a great time talking and just learning about how to prune vines and his story and who he is. And then we ended up he he made a barbecue and we ended up eating, and he opened up a bottle from 1987. It was his second, yes, his second vintage that he ever made. He's like, I just found this in an old shed, and it's been sitting And I don't think there's a better time to open it up. I'm like, please don't open it up. Don't waste that bottle on me. He's like, when am I going to open it?
You're crazy. I would have been like, okay, let's do it.
I felt so bad. But
Oh, so tell me about it. What was it? Was it a cab? What was it?
so I haven't had ever a kosher wine that old. I mean, I haven't had a wine. I only drink kosher wine. So I've never had a wine that old. And he didn't know which grape it was.
Okay.
And there was no marking on the bottle. And there was like dirt. Like it was like sitting in we had to literally, he's like, should I wipe off the dirt? I'm like, I don't know. Do you wipe off dirt? He's so great. He's just like,
Yeah.
like this kind of loves and so like real with the wine. And we opened it up and it tasted like an old wine.
Was it still drinkable?
Very. He was like preparing me. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what's gonna be. And I'm like, why are you doing all these preparations? I'm like, just let's drink it. And we had it, and it was fantastic, and didn't even need any breathing or anything. So we
Well,
had
I wouldn't imagine, yeah, but that's impressive that he had a 38-year-old wine that was drinkable.
and he opened up.
Good.
I literally he had a Cabernet Franc, and we stood in the barrel room for, I would say, close to an hour, and I could not stop smelling this 23 Cabernet Franc that he hasn't bottled yet. And I couldn't, it was like so perfumey. And so the smell, and the funny thing is that I was smelling it and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him like, are you doing the same thing I'm doing? He's like, yeah, I can't stop. And it was just like the aromas were so sensual.
It's
And
amazing.
so,
It's such a special thing that you got to do that with him.
and just walking the vineyards and sitting with him and talking, we spoke for hours. I was there for well over 10 hours with him.
Amazing. And where else did you go? You went to
Then I went, so
Marciano?
from there, because he's in the Santa Cruz Mountains, so I flew into San Francisco and spent time with him. And then the next day, he was actually supposed to come with me, but he didn't end up coming because
Mm.
he said the vines need me. It's amazing. He does everything himself. No, really everything himself.
Literally everything, right?
Like he is a legend. This man, and he's not young.
No,
He does everything himself.
incredible. Right, down to the invoice, down to everything. Yeah.
So then I drove up north to Napa, and just being in Napa, like right when you come into and right when you come into Napa, just that experience of the Mayacamas Mountains and just being surrounded by
Amazing.
them, it's just there. I mean, there really is nothing like it. At least that's semi close to home.
It's incredible.
And so we went to a winery that is not very well known. I had heard of it, never had their wine before, and I sent it to you, and you said you had never had their wine before, and that's called OneHope.
Sure, I know OneHope, but I've never tasted a OneHope. No.
So we tasted all of their vintages. Spent the night there actually, which was really special.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
the
Yeah, at the winery.
At the winery, yeah. The CEO,
You slept right in the barrel room, I imagine.
of course. I mean, come on. Just took a sleeping bag and right there. No,
Yeah,
they have a beautiful grounds. The CEO is Jewish, Jake, and
right.
he handed me the 21 vintage, which was the first one I tried there, and he said that his bubby, he himself is not religious, but his bubby only drank kosher wine, and he wished that she had an opportunity to try his kosher wine, and she always had asked him to make kosher wine.
It's so cool.
And so I tried the 13, the 14, the 21, and now all of their Fumé Blanc is kosher. And that white was I mean, their wines are bold, they're all cabs. the reds are all cabs, and they're bold and they're beautiful and they're really big wines. And those I really liked the 14. It's just, I mean, obviously it's at the right age now.
Right.
21 was really young.
As I would imagine, yeah.
And I think this week, not to really rub it in, but
You
I
can
have
rub it.
pulled more barrel samples this week than I have in my entire life. So I was with one of the secret people that are he's not very well known in the kosher wine world, but he should be, because he his name is Dan Levin. Have you ever heard of him?
Yes.
And they call him in Napa. I had run into people who knew him. Like, he's so well known there, they call him Kosher Dan.
Right.
And he, for the past 30 years, has been the primary mashgiach for the OU and for the Star K, crisscrossing Napa, making, actually the winemaker, making the all the kosher wine. He does the kosher wine at OneHope, which actually has his name on it, which I was very happy to see. That it's the first time he ever put his name. He's a very humble man. The first time he put his name on a wine. Marciano, he does all half of the so we went to Marciano. I'll tell you about that in a second. But you know that half of the wine that Marciano makes is kosher.
I didn't know that number, no.
And it was interesting going into the barrel room. They actually have it divided. Half of the barrel room is kosher and half of it is non-kosher. That was really interesting. Beautiful, beautiful grounds. I'll tell you about Marciano in a second.
Mhm.
And he makes also at Napa Valley Reserve, which is not a wine that's available to the public. He
Sure.
makes wine there. A lot of kosher wine there, and he did until recently make the wine at Mayakamis also.
Right. I saw Yoni Hook opened an older Napa Valley Reserve that I was quite jealous of.
So he opened a 15 Napa Valley Reserve for me, and it was
Yeah.
just dreams. He opened a 15 Napa Valley Reserve and a 16 Mayakamis, and both of them were dreams.
Well, you're making my $18 Prosecco look pretty bad.
Well, I didn't pay for any of it, but I could never afford any, even Marciano. Like, that's what I was thinking about when I was sitting at Marciano tasting the wine. Like, it's just, first of all, you go up these beautiful, I mean, all these places, like Binyo's place, to go up these mountains. I mean, you're like
Right.
really, and then Marciano was like in these rolling vineyards where, they have olive trees there. And this Maurice Marciano, he actually, I got to see him. And that was just, and then sitting in this tasting room that overlooks the entire vineyard, it's
Yeah.
so, like, it does justice to the price of those wines.
Yeah. Yeah. They're special wines. I do typically get to taste the Terra Gracia, and it's really great. And I'm pretty sure that's a Cab Franc. Do you
Yes,
remember that?
yes. It's a different blend every year.
Right.
It's a
Okay. It's yeah. I mean, their price is, it's hard for me to ever say justify whatever, but they're great wines. They are great, great
They are
wines.
just great.
Right.
I mean, they're always a blend. And I got to meet the winemakers there. Really, and what's amazing also, which I didn't know, I kind of knew that because it said estate on it, but
Mm,
they only make wine from the vines on their estate.
right.
And
Yep.
there's just something really special about going out there and touching the vine and then drinking the wine, that visceral experience of, he was pulling some barrel samples. And
Yeah, it's special to be able to do that. At a recent thing I did, I was talking to one of the people about that specific topic of, like, I think people in Israel take for granted that they're able to just go to vineyards and drink wine there. Like on the East Coast, if you're kosher, like, there's nothing. There is a place, and this is what I was talking to the lady about, but there is a place in Virginia that I think still makes kosher wine. But and I've been meaning to check into it because I just to go, even if the wine is bad, it's still a worthwhile thing to be able to sit in a vineyard and drink kosher wine, because it's just something we don't get to do. I mean, there's wineries near you, aren't there?
No, they're in Niagara. Not,
See, I thought that was close, but just goes to show you I don't know my geography well.
no, it's
Of
quite
Canada.
about 7 hours.
That's
It's
oh, that's
further than New York from here.
Okay, that is really far. So that's basically the same distance for me.
Yeah.
Okay, well then fine, then I take that back. But um,
I think
yeah,
there was
it's such a especially and like California for all its problems is such a beautiful place. I mean,
so beautiful, and there's something really special about the ability, and I don't think there's many places that you can do this. There are in the world, there are, but a handful where you, as a kosher consumer, can engage with what the non-kosher wine consumer engages with. Like sitting at OneHope, we were getting the same experience as a
it's true,
non-kosher
right?
consumer would get, but with kosher wine.
Right. No, that's true. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like I tell people all the time, that ask me about it. There's nothing unique really about kosher wine is no different than non-kosher wine. There's nothing different, and that experience shouldn't be any different for us. So that's really cool that you got to do that.
There's also what I realized.
You're supposed to say, by the way, that it wasn't the scene without you, Kenny. That's what you're supposed to
It
say. It
wasn't the scene without you. I really would have loved to experience, but
wasn't the same, it was better.
we
Yeah.
will, we will do this together.
So
But what was
to
interesting,
be fair, to you, I actually did book ticket. I booked tickets with my wife, and we were very close to pulling the trigger on it, but I couldn't make it work. And you did want me to come, and you pushed me to come, but it's my fault, not your fault. I
I,
really wanted to, and it would have been
we're gonna.
special. But
I also have better connections now, so I think that like I know I've done it already, so I know what to do right, and I can definitely, I think the next time even better.
well, um, that's really special that you got to do that. You've really your recent travels have left me wanting more for myself.
I
So
realized something interesting by tasting all of these California cabs, that the kosher consumer, like this is like so what the kosher consumer wants. They look for it. They wait for it. Those really very oaky California cabs. That I just kept on tasting. I'm like, oh, this is the taste. Like that they're looking for. That was interesting to me.
well, that's true, but I try to steer people steer
I know,
people
I
away
know.
from that.
After saying that we steer them away from it, but was interesting
Of
being
course,
engaging with those really bold cabs.
listen, there's certainly nothing wrong with any of those wines. Those are great wines. I just try to teach people there's more out there than just that. But yeah, those are fantastic wines.
It was
Um,
it was literally a trip that dreams are made of, no question.
um, we have some good episodes coming up.
Yeah,
We have
we have.
some interesting interviews coming up. Um, but we got to do it more often. I got to sit down and look at my calendar right after we wrap this up
I actually
now. But I think we need to sit down and look at my calendar when we can do
I
next.
did an interview with Dan Levin that we're going to release soon. That my wife said is one of the best episodes. I mean, sorry that I mean, like not that you weren't in there, but
I got you. I wasn't in it. I got you.
no, but nothing to do with that. But she said just the listening to him, and he gave me some like really cool stories and things that have happened. I mean, being a kosher winemaker in non-kosher wineries, stuff happens, and it came up in the interview, and it was really a fun interview. And we sat outside at the OneHope Winery. It was like already about 12, maybe even 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was tired, and I'm like, I really want to interview you. And we sat by this beautiful fireplace, the fire pit, and we were drinking a couple. We had the Napa Valley Reserve and the Mayacamas sitting there. Interesting that we were at OneHope drinking other wine, but so let it be. And he just is a very humble, understated person, and that's going to be a great episode when it
Well, I'll
comes
look
out.
forward to that. All right. It was great to see you.
So great to see you.
And I'm gonna look forward to watching that one, sitting back with a glass of wine. I wouldn't mind if it were a OneHope wine. If
Yeah,
anyone wants to send me one. All right. Great seeing you. And as always, we look forward to hearing any feedback, any questions, any comments. You can send them I think there's a text option, but there's definitely an email option. There's a text option, right?
you can text us. I mean, if you know us, you can text either of us. But
Rabbi's beeper from 1981 will go off.
kosherwinepodcast@gmail.com. You can always email us there, and we will probably read it on live like we did
Yeah.
today.
All right. Great seeing you.
Great to see you.
I am.